This is our warm-up for April the 17th. This was from yesterday. You should have talked about what a food chain is and what the arrows represent. Arrows represent the flow of energy. So if we have this plant here, our producer, our autotroph, it starts our energy flow because it doesn't eat anything. So there are no arrows pointing to it. So it starts here. You won't always just have one plant producer slash autotroph. You might have more than one producer. And realistically, normally in an ecosystem, there's more than one type of autotroph, more than one type of producer. For example, the grasses and the trees and the flowers, any type of autotroph. So you'll have more than one. In this case, we just have one. And so it starts our energy flow. And then from here, I just chose the squirrel to look at next. So from plant, the energy flows to the squirrel, and then the squirrel's energy flows to the fox. So that means if the plant is energy is flowing to the squirrel is eating the plant. If the energy is flowing from the squirrel to the fox is eating the squirrel. Another way to look at that, it's a little bit simpler, is that if you just label your arrows with the words eaten by. So plant gets eaten by the rabbit. Rabbit gets eaten by the fox. And sometimes you might get a food web like this where you don't necessarily know the names of the organisms like you do up here or even here. They see how they have the names on them. Even pictures, you might just get numbers or letters or names of living things you've never heard of before. Can you still figure out which is my autotroph? Yes, you can, because remember that the autotrophs, the producers that start the energy flow, like up here, is going to be the one that has no arrows pointing to it, because that means it's not eating anything. The only thing it's doing here is getting eaten. So it's not eating anything. There's no arrows pointing to it. But here, 3, 2, and 4 are eating 5. No arrows pointing to it. That is our producer. That's our autotroph. So we'll try that again here. Where do we not have anything pointing to an organism? Here we have 2 cases. So I see the clover here. The clover, I'm going to label that as my autotroph slash producer, right? Autotroph. That's an O. And I also see the seeds are an autotroph because there's no arrow pointing to it. It doesn't eat anything, which means it must make its own food. That's called being an autotroph slash producer. It produces its own food. Okay, so now that I know where the energy flow is starting here, I'm going to go ahead and read my question. According to this food web, which organism would the bobcat and diamondback rattlesnake, so bobcat and the rattlesnake, I'm going to look for that here. Here is the diamondback rattlesnake. And where's the bobcat? Right here at the top of the food chain. Compete for, which organisms would the bobcat and the diamond rattlesnake compete for if the mouse population and swamp rabbit population decrease? So mouse population goes down and the swamp rabbit population goes down. Okay, so I'm gonna add some color here just so we can make a little bit more sense of this. I'm gonna put this in red, which means that they're going down. Red is kind of a good color for that. So they're going down. What's gonna happen? What are they gonna compete for if these food sources are not as readily available because the population went down for the mice and the population went down for the rabbit? Well, what's the other thing that bobcat and the rattlesnake both eat? How would I know that? you'd have to look at the arrows. What arrow is pointing to the bobcat, that's also pointing to the rattlesnake. Well, the mouse is pointing to the bobcat and the rattlesnake, so they both eat that, but the population went down. The rabbit has an arrow pointing to the rattlesnake and the bobcat, but that population went down. So what's the next thing? I see sparrow, raccoon, and the eastern cottontail rabbit. So the eastern cottontail is going to the bobcat. It is also going to the rattlesnake. So that is one thing that they'll be competing for. They don't have enough of this, but they can both eat that. So they're gonna have to compete with each other to get that food source that is more readily available. So we're gonna go ahead and put that food source in green. That one's good to go, but they're gonna have to fight for it. They have to compete. Raccoon, I see that it is pointing to the bobcat, but not the rattlesnake, so that's not something they will compete for. The sparrow is pointing to the bobcat and the rattlesnake, so that is another thing that they have readily available. Population did not decrease like it says here, so they're going to compete for the cottontail rabbit and the sparrow.